Kaze. Got the volume down. Got both my fake lightings up. Have this fake, but we're not faking Lords of the Ring online. Hopefully everyone's liked the content on Linux. Going to go back to the other thing that the channel is about is talking about things. Lords of the Ring online. I've never been this far in the game. My character's level 50. I've been kind of stuck in the same areas over and over and over. So the game has been a little bit stale as I keep making alts. In a lot of these games I make alts. I guess I'm addicted to the quick leveling at the low levels. And I've been trying to get this character up where I can fight things my own level. I've over leveled all the areas I was at. So now I'm into this new area. This is called foreshadowing, YouTube. So, how do you know you're overmatched? Well, there's a lot of different scenarios and there are a lot of different things. So let's give some examples of areas where we might be overmatched. The number one thing is you're new to a situation, to a new endeavor. And when I'm talking about endeavor, it might be a profession, but specifically new tasks. And you might be overmatched if you're in some type of competitive or comparison situation with someone else that has more experience than you on that task. This normally happens when you're a beginner at things, and you're more likely to experience this either in the beginning of your life or the later end of your life. The beginning is obvious, like that's intuitive, you haven't done everything, and so when you get to a new task, let's say you got to paint a fence and your buddy's Tom Sawyer, and he's going to get you to paint it. Now, for an older person, they're not going to fall for that. But what's going to happen as technology moves forward, they invariably get left behind. And let's just not think about computers. Just think about turn of the 1800s to the 1900s when we went from horse-drawn carriages to cars, right? There's just people that were like, I'm never getting one of those contraptions. A horse just keeps going forever, blah, 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 right? So if you find yourself in one of those situations, it's easy to identify you're overmatched. Think about playing chess against somebody and you have no way, let's say you don't say what your rating is and you go into it blind. You're going to look for signs, but how do you know what you don't know? So, for example, I think Donald Rumsfeld was once quoted saying, the unknown unknowns are what we don't know, right? So there's some unknowns that you know, like they have T-72 tanks in Iraq and maybe some T-80s. And they have, we know they bought about 3,000. The unknown unknowns is how committed are those guys to staying in tanks, whatever, right? So in this game, as in maybe other things you do, I'm going to go against some elite mobs and I'm going to see what I do. And the elite mobs are ones with like a circle over their head, or, you know, when I identify them, they have a circle and they have red on it. If only life was like that, where you could see that it was that obvious, you know, what your level that you're getting into. So how do we check that in real life? Right, so when I was younger and I was in college, I was a philosophy major, and so you're always trying to get a read on people, and you know the biggest thing, are they liberal or conservative? I went to college in Kentucky, so it was a lot more conservative than grew up in the Metro Detroit area. I grew up in Detroit, eventually went to high school in a town called Oxford. Yes, YouTube that, Oxford. And but that was still like, those people were part of the automotive industry, so they were a little more liberal because they're more exposed to more people. Kentucky was really more conservative, and I was in northern Kentucky, and that was supposed to be the light, but it was still conservative to me. It was very conservative. So I would ask litmus test questions. So what's a litmus test question? Number one is abortion. how someone's stand on abortion is number one. Number two, what's their stand on the death penalty? And so, depending on their answers, you're going to be able to kind of get an idea of person. Now, that's not ideal. That's an 18, 19-year-old trying to figure out his path through life. And as I've gotten older in my life, I would ask people different questions. I might not ask those questions. That's a hammer kind of question, right? That's pretty blunt, and it's really inquisitive into someone's feelings, and it can be obtrusive. I'm gonna fight trees in here too. It's cool when I fight trees. I don't know if it was in this edit, but some of the trees can be enemies. It's cool. So one way is asking clarifying questions to everyone around you. Now I'm going into this instance. And you're going to see this instance is full of deletes and higher. So we're going to see what happens. So that's number one. There's other different ways, but for the sake of not boring you on the one subject, you can do certain things to find out what your situation is. When you find out that you're overmatched, and let's talk about if you're talking to your parents, and this applies to someone my age and someone younger than me, because we all have had parents at certain points. And my mom luckily was around until I was like in my 40s or 50s. And, I could talk to her, and talking to her had certain caveats, and, we would disagree sometimes. So everyone's heard of the fight or flight syndrome. So like you get triggered, good or bad, you're in a situation and your spidey sense tingles that you should get out of it. Should you fight or flee? And recently I've had some training over the past couple of years where I'm curling up my thing. I might be nervous. Let me put that down. Fight, freeze, or flight. And I never thought about that. But a great example of that is one time we had a dog. It was a Beagle Shepherd mix. But my sons and I were all standing there. And he busted out of the gate. And that was like verboten. So my oldest son ran off after it immediately. Didn't hesitate, knew what to do. The younger son just sat there frozen. He didn't know what to do, right? There's a bunch of things going probably on in his mind. I'm not supposed to run out in the street, but the dog's running out there. Got to protect the dog, but I'm not allowed to run out in the street. What's my dad going to do? What's my older brother going to do? He kind of sat there frozen. My oldest son charges into, he's fantastic, right? He's fearless in a lot of ways. Or maybe he's not, but he doesn't show it. So that was an example of freezing, and fight or flight's obvious. So one of the things after you're gauging all this, what's going to be your response? Fools rush in where angels fear to tread, right? So in video games, the penalty for your dying is low because you're not really dying. And when MMORPGs first came out, the death penalty was brutal. Like you would die there and all your stuff would be there. And you'd have to do corpse runs and recover your corpse. And some people like that. And in a PvP setting, they could even maybe take your stuff. I didn't want to. I don't want to do that. So you're in your life. You're with your significant other, and you talk about politics. They say don't talk about politics, religion, and something else. You start talking about politics, it just goes in a bad way. Usually males will clam up, or their volume gets louder. You didn't hear me before. Let me make sure you hear me now. Right? Because in general, I think males have poor control of their emotions because we weren't wired to do that. We have more fight or flight. If you look at not every male went out to hunt, but you think about when we were hunter and gatherers, that you got to go out and what if you had to kill a buffalo to feed your group you're in, or some big animal, right? At a certain point, you just got to be like YOLO, right? And you do whatever you have to do to gear yourself up for that. And there's other people that gathered. Right when you're gathering, you don't want snakes or critters around you, so you might be talking a little more verbose, and you might not be as stealthy. You might make noise in the brush to keep those kind of things away. So there's two different strategies for those jobs. And so, fight, freeze, or flee. Hindsight's 20/20. A lot of times you'll say to yourself, was this argument really worth, why am I staying here? Why am I staying here? I'm going to eventually face the bosses. You see, I've mowed through everyone. This is an elder. They're a little bit tougher. So I'm like, said intermediate. I've been just mowing through everything. So at certain points in your head, you say, I'm going to stay in this argument no matter what. Because at the time, it seems like it's important, but it might not be important. When I was having the problem with Linux and setting up the permissions for external drives, I eventually would stop for the day on the problem and do something else because, I had to give my brain a reset. I'd like to consider one of my advantages as focus, but man, at a certain point, you got to withdraw from the situation. There's no dishonor in any of those functions, but some of those choices could get you in worse situations than other situations. Discretion is the better part of valor. So YouTube, what you're going to see, you get to guess what I chose in this scenario. I had a video recently of a guy that kept fleeing and he saved the day. He carried us to the point where we could complete the mission, and it's fantastic. And so this lesson is in video games, and it's in your life. It's in any type of argument you have with a spouse, a child, a parent, a friend, a coworker, anything. And I'm going to tell you pretty much, it's almost never worth it to dig in. There's certain cases, but they're so small. And then that's an argument you have in your head. Well, I can't let them think that I'm weak. So I need to stand, I really got to stand up for this right now. But that's maybe you haven't read the signs. Maybe you haven't seen if you're overmatched. Maybe it's a trap. Maybe they've been waiting for you to do that, YouTube. So in everything, I want you to think about withdrawing's a thing. Here's the two bosses. Now I go on the one guy and I see what he is. He's a little more elite than elite. And there's two of them. And I'm like, I take a potion or something to say, help me. Help me take on these two. I took on 3 earlier, YouTube. One was an elder. And maybe, what did I get to, half health? And so at what point did I decide to run here? You can't see my health bar. I should have left that up. That's my fault. Maybe I'll put it in post so you can kind of see what's going on here. But YouTube, I want to thank you for all the support, all the watches and all the views, and the people that subscribe. Thank you. And the people that like, those really help. I'm just like every other YouTuber. I got to get to 500, then I can monetize it. Oh crap, YouTube. Looks like I didn't flee. I chose wrongly. Chose poorly. Thanks, YouTube. Ronin Kaze, out.